conducting without a figure like Richard Wagner. Not only because he was the one who decided to turn his back to the audience, which was a revolution, but also to control the orchestra this way and to get so much result from direct eye contact with the musicians.
Which is the thing you do as well, isn't it?
Yes. It's very difficult to describe in 2 words what is conducting or what is conducting Wagner operas. But the tempo is very important. There is a moment when you have to release all the power of orchestra. Then there is a moment when you have to support totally the voice. Or ensemble of voices on stage. And then there is a moment when you have to create a mysterious atmosphere. Without this mystery, Wagner is not Wagner.
I wondered if it was important for you to take the German out of Wagner, because to me he's an international composer, and he doesn't belong to a country any more than Shakespeare or Beethoven belongs to a country. And I wondered if that's important to you.
I think it's a very interesting question, especially if we talk about the Ring. There is not once a mentioning of Germany or Deutschland. So I think it's a story of the world. And I think Wagner himself, being quite a smart man, and because he also was not only composing music, but famously he was also writing, preparing the libretto, and he understood that the Ring is about greed, hatred, love. It's about nature, it's about power, it's about domination.
Yes, betrayal, treachery.
And then nature being kept in peace and harmony. It's not German. I think it's a world, and it shouldn't be associated with the Nazis. Or
no, that's really important,
because
isn't it?
if we are able to do it after the Second World War, where this city was so destroyed, you know.
Incredible, yes.
That means any country can do it.
Wagner's Russian adventure was a triumph. He was even sounded out about taking over as artistic director of the Mariinsky. Had he accepted, there might never have been a Bayreuth festival house. He might never have completed the Ring cycle. His story would have had a very different and probably less controversial ending. But despite the adulation, the pull of home was too strong for Wagner to resist. He returned to Germany instead, where the money he'd made on tour was soon swallowed up by his huge debts.
By 1864, Wagner's life had reached its lowest ebb. He was no longer a young firebrand in danger of being imprisoned for his revolutionary politics. He was a 50-year-old in danger of being imprisoned for his simply astonishing debt. He'd written Tristan, but that had been declared unproducible by most people who had seen it or tried to rehearse it. His relationship with Matilda Wiesendonck was over, his marriage was over, it seemed his career was over, all that bright promise. And how could he possibly give the world these preposterously ambitious music dramas? If he were to write a wish list, I suppose he'd come up with one thing. He would need someone so powerful, so extraordinarily rich, that they could write off his debts, they could build in the theatre he wanted, they could guarantee him the posterity that he knew his genius merited. But that would be asking for a miracle. On March the 10th, 1864, a miracle happened. Quite unexpectedly, Maximilian II, King of Bavaria, died. He left his opulent kingdom to his son, Ludwig, a handsome, eccentric 18-year-old. And one of Ludwig's first actions on acceding to the throne was to send for his hero, the artist he most adored in all the world, Richard Wagner.
Wagner was so used to fleeing the debt collector that it took Ludwig's messenger some time to track him down with the good news. The king was offering to pay off all his debts and bankroll his future work. And if that wasn't proof enough of his passion, Ludwig went on to build what must surely be the world's most extravagant fan letter. Schloss Neuschwanstein wasn't completed until 1886, 3 years after Wagner's death, so he never had a chance to wander through these extraordinary spaces, all inspired by his work. But he had something better, the king's blank check. After years of struggle and disappointment, Wagner's dreams of artistic freedom must finally have seemed attainable.
What a patron to have.
No one ever built something like this for Mozart or Beethoven. So what is it about Wagner's music which inspires some men to seize on his stories and ideas things which belong in the theatre and seek to give them substance in the real world instead? In the Middle Ages, Nuremberg was capital of the German cultural renaissance, a backdrop to Wagner's opera The Master Singers of Nuremberg. Later, of course, Hitler chose it as the stage for his infamous propaganda rallies.
Well, the thing is, Joachim, I'm familiar with the idea that whenever there's a, footage of the Nuremberg rallies with Hitler standing on that podium over there, usually someone has decided to play Wagner in the background. But you have theories that actually Wagner is more deeply embedded in the modern Nazi Nuremberg.
Yes, I think so. First of all, when you take all these party rallies that we had here, in the evening then there was a Festaufführung, a celebration of the Meistersingers of Nuremberg.
Right, one of Wagner's truly great operas.
Yes.
And they played that and then came here, didn't they, to this enormous, what was then, there were how many soldiers would be here?
I'm sure more than 100,000.
More than 100,000.
Yeah, from all over Germany, they gathered here.
And the party faithful would have listened to the Meistersingers first.
In the evening, they listened to the Meistersingers, and the next
come
day,
here.
Yes, and they played it themselves. Hitler loved the Meistersinger. He loved to whistle the tunes to his guest. He could whistle all the tunes that the Meistersinger could. Yes, he liked that.
Thought.
There's a certain scene that triggered in him, I think, that whole rally idea.
Yeah.
It was the third act. There you have all the guilds of Nuremberg marching onto the stage, and you have like costume masses carrying flags and their guild signs and symbols, and they're singing together. And this is on the small stage of the opera, and then transferred or even translated into reality in this huge field here in Nuremberg.
So they perverted the style of Wagner, if you like, the emotional impact of the music and the grandeur and the spectacle, which does have an enormous effect on audiences who love Wagner. You do get turned into a jelly by the end of the evening.
Yes.
It's so extreme.
Yes. That was the first step. The second was that he thought one could teach the Germans to see the world in a way which you find in Wagner operas, in a dialectical way, that you have a protagonist and an antagonist, that you have a good and an evil, that you have like a Iago and a Desdemona, or in the Wagner case, it is Siegfried and the dragon. Now, if you have this in the opera, it is perfectly all right, because the opera needs the tension of drama between the good and the evil. But as soon as you turn it into reality, it becomes a devastating political fantasy and ideology.
Of course, a defender of Wagner like me, although I'm not a complete defender of Wagner, would say Hitler saw one side of Wagner, and we tend to see Hitler's side of Wagner. Because Hitler was such a huge figure in the 20th century, and because his taste for Wagner was so enormous, we tend to say, what did Hitler see in Wagner? And we look through Hitler's viewfinder at this enormous man and see one little area like that, instead of seeing the whole thing.
If Joachim's right, that makes Nuremberg the sinister descendant of Ludwig's castle Neuschwanstein, a monstrous example of the way Wagner's music inspires some men to tear down the boundary which ought to separate fantasy from fact.
The railing there surrounds on three sides the area known as the Führer's Kanzel, the Führer's podium, and that's where Hitler stood. And that's where tourists to this day stand. Others, like me, can't actually bring themselves to go there. I'm not being oversensitive, I don't think. I just don't like... It's in the same way I'm not very good at picking up guns. I can do it occasionally, but I don't think I want to put myself in that position. And I don't want to hedge around here. I am deeply uncomfortable in Nuremberg talking about Wagner. I realize how close to to the Nazi fantasy world Wagner was, and how deeply stitched into Hitler's vision of the world. It's very difficult. I have to keep reminding myself, and I do it best by simply listening to the music, how unbelievably complicated, ambiguous, emotionally honest, raw, revolutionary, anti-fascist Wagner truly is. I suppose I think of it like this. Imagine a great, beautiful silk tapestry of infinite colour and complexity that has been stained indelibly. It's still a beautiful tapestry of miraculous workmanship and gorgeous colour and silken texture. But that stain is real, and I'm afraid Hitler and Nazism have stained Wagner. For some people, that stain ruins the whole work. For others, it is just something you have to face up to. And here's a place, as storm clouds gather in Nuremberg. Here's a place to think about such things, I suppose.
By the time he finished work on the Master Singers, there was a new woman in Wagner's life. Cosima, the daughter of his friend Franz Liszt. They married in 1870 after a scandalous affair which almost cost him Ludwig's patronage. This was the bait that brought Wagner to Bayreuth. Do you remember it? The Baroque Rococo extravagance which is the Margravial Opera House. Wagner had resumed work on the Ring Cycle and was searching for a suitable theatre to stage it in. A helpful friend suggested this place might fit the bill.